So, good evening to everyone here. I welcome you all for the today's Knowledge Tuesday session. I'm Sumitra from HTIC MedTech Incubator hosting the today's session. Before we move to the session, I would request all the participants to stay on mute and please unmute by yourself while you want to speak. We also created a feedback form for the today's session. We will be posting the feedback form link in the chat box. So requesting the participants to please fill the feedback form at the end of the session for us to improving the upcoming Knowledge Tuesday sessions. So for the today's session, we have the speaker is Mr. Manu Iyer, early stage investor at Inflection Point Ventures, CEO, managing director at Blue Hill Capital, and also managing partner at Blue Hill Retail. So, and the topic for the today's session is understanding term sheets. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, hi Archana. Thanks for the invite. Can I share my screen, please?
Yes, sir. You can share your screen. So there will be a present now screen, sir, in the right bottom side.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you guys see it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Perfect, sir.
Okay. Are we ready to go? One second.
Yes, sir. We can start, sir.
Yeah. Can you see my camera also?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Hi everyone. This is Manu here. I manage Blue Hill Capital. We're largely into early stage investments in the deep tech, clean tech, hardware tech, healthcare spaces. Um, so happy to be here to chat with you guys about term sheets. I think I've had the opportunity to speak to some of you before this at different events. So basically, just want to have a short discussion, about term sheets, and then we can open it out to Q&A to answer what you guys might want to know specifically about term sheets, right? So what basically is a term sheet, right? A term sheet is, for all means and purposes, an agreement, right? It's an agreement between an entrepreneur and an investor. Very broadly, everything on a term sheet can be characterized under one of these two, right? One is the economic part of the term sheet, and the other is the governance and the control part of it. And I will use governance and control interchangeably. Going forward. So a good term sheet, as it says up there, it should align the goals of the investors and entrepreneurs, right? There isn't really a science to a term sheet. I would say it's closer to an art with certain parameters in place, with a little bit of structure in place. A good term sheet can be 2 pages long, and a bad term sheet can be 20 pages long, right? So at the end of the day, are we able to get to a point, that aligns both these goals, right? And while most of the entrepreneurs, everyone is focused on the economics aspect of the term sheet, people end up missing out on the governance side, and these come into play, or these come into the picture when you get another round of investment, or when you're doing your Series A or Series B, or in the event of an acquisition or a merger. That is when you actually realize, oh, I gave up control at some point, or I gave up more than I intended to do at some point, right? So since we said we need to align the goals of the investors and entrepreneurs, right? What are the goals of the investors, and what are the goals of the entrepreneurs, right? High level, broadly, an investor wants to maximize the proceeds of his investment, right? Most of the time an investor is going to be a fund, right? And as you guys know, a fund is going to have a limited life, right? They're going to have 6, 7, 8 years of life. So in that period, they're going to want to invest once, maybe invest twice, invest thrice, participate each time pro rata, and then get an exit, right? Get an exit to return money to their LPs, their limited partners, right? So they want to maximize the proceeds in a certain time period, right? IRR is the number that an investor, at least a fund, IRR is a metric that they are tracking, right? While how do they maximize the proceeds of their investments? That is by ensuring that the founders are well motivated, one, and to protect their downside when things are going bad, right? In the event that something goes wrong, you want to ensure that you have all the levers to pull in order to get the investment back on track, right? On the other side, an entrepreneur wants to raise capital, for whatever the company's immediate goals are, right? And most of the time, the entrepreneur wants to raise money for the immediate horizon, right? You want to raise it for the next 12 to 16 to 18 months, and hopefully you are building and accreting value in that period, so that you don't dilute as much at each stage, and you dilute in each round only for as much as is necessary, right? And an entrepreneur wants to maintain control, wants to protect his personal position, and retain, the maximum upside potential, right? So these goals, while it might seem conflicting at some level, I think the only part when these goals kind of align is it good for both, the investor and the entrepreneur. So let's look at let's look at some of the details of the term sheet, from an economic standpoint first, and then we'll go into the governance standpoint. So you guys can hear me, right? Because it's completely blank and I have zero feedback.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Okay, great. So the first thing is the economic side of it, right? Very high level, it is how much is being invested, right? If you get a term sheet, you're saying, hey, I'm going to invest, let's say $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, right? How much? The next question is, okay, I've decided, okay, the term sheet says $200,000. Okay, $200,000 at what price, right? Between these two, how much and at what price, you're going to largely decide most other things, right? Which is what the overall value of the company is going to be, how much dilution is going to happen on the cap table, how much money is going to come into the company, obviously, and through what instrument are we taking on this money, right? And there are multiple ways to get money onto the table, right? Into the company, right? You want to bring in money through straight equity. You say, hey, my company is worth 10 crores. You bring in 1 crore, and the company is now post money valued at 11 crores, right? That is as straight, as simple, as easy as it gets. But for most means and purposes, right? For an early stage startup, it is very hard to say that the company is worth 10 crores, right? You as a founder, as an entrepreneur, would want to say, hey, the company is worth 15, or want to say the company is worth 20, right? From the investor's standpoint, given the risk, right? Given the risk of investing in the first round, given the risk of investing at the seed stage, and given the risk of the company kind of making it through all these stages and coming out at the end of the tunnel, right? The investor wants to maximize his position, right? And so majority of the time, at least in the early stage, a term sheet can be as simple as, hey, we'll sign, we don't agree on an investment together, we don't agree on a valuation together, and so we'll defer the question of a valuation. We'll say we'll do a convertible of some sort. When you say a convertible, for all means and purposes, it's in India it's a debenture, and it's debt, right? So you say, okay, we'll invest in an instrument which will later convert into equity, right? At certain at once certain parameters are hit, once your next funding round goals have been hit, or once your next your Series A has been raised, or it can be anything that is defined between the two investors. Usually there is a quantum that is mentioned, right? Usually it says, okay, I'm investing now on a convertible note, and your next qualified round of investment, right, which could be your Series A, or which could mention that your next round, when you raise at least, let's say, $1.5 million or $2 million, at that point I will convert at an X% discount to that round's valuation, right? So you're essentially saying we will defer the decision or defer the effort to value the company to a point later in the life of the company, when we have more metrics, right? When we have more numbers to get to that valuation, right? So at that point, potentially the company has steady revenues, or potentially the company has more revenues than the company did when you were taking in your seed stage investment. Most likely during your seed stage investment, you're pre-revenue, or you're doing a pilot, or you're doing some close friends and family referred executions, right? And so I can't, as an investor, I can't really value the company based on that, and so I defer that discussion to later. And we'll come back to that, the concept of conversion and the concept of a cap and floor a little later. The other part is voting rights, right? And this is again something that is very important. From an economic standpoint, it will have an impact a little later as well. ESOPs are something that every investor wants to see. You need to, at an early stage in your company's life, right? It is very unlikely that you would be able to pay market rate or market price to hire people, right? So you would hire people by enticing them with ESOPs, right? Saying that while I can't pay you, whatever you could have potentially earned outside, the potential of upside, if the company does well, is going to be so much more. And so what most investors will ask for is a 10% ESOP pool or a 15% ESOP pool, which generally has to be replenished at the end of or before every round of investment that happens. So say that I'm offering a term sheet, or I'm offering an investment now, I will ask for a 10% ESOP pool to be constituted, 10% essentially post dilution. So post the investment, I will say, hey, you should have 10% available for you to go out and hire people, and for you to essentially bring in the people required to make the company work and make the goals of the company work, right? There are multiple other things. Liquidation preference is something that's very important. Again, it's a little technical. I'm not sure how many people are familiar, but liquidation preference essentially says that I, as an investor, and liquidation preference is defined by, it says usually 1x, 1.5x, 2x, right? It can be anything. Again, it's something that the investor and the founder agree upon. So what the liquidation preference says is that, let's say a 2x liquidation preference says that in the event of an acquisition, or in the event of a sale, or in the event of any liquidation event, I, as the investor, will get 2x of my money. This is assuming that the liquidation preference agreed upon is 2x, right? I had put in 100,000, I will get 200,000, post which everybody else gets paid. So say the company was sold for I had put 100,000, and the company was sold for say 500,000. If it's a 2x liquidation preference, I will get paid 200,000, post which the remaining people on the cap table, including the founders, including ESOPs, including whoever is on the cap table, will get to pro rata the 300,000 that is remaining, right? So, I mean, generally 1x is considered safe and is considered normal, but I have seen 1.5, I have seen 2. The other technicality there is participating and non-participating. So participating is essentially what you would call a double dip, right? An investor gets to take, I mean, the example I gave before was a non-participating 2x lic pref, right? A participating would mean that I would take the 200,000 off the 500,000, and of the 300,000, I would again participate once as part of owning as part of my presence on the cap table, right? So again, see, these things are, provisions that are put into the term sheet in order to maximize, like we saw in the second slide, it is to maximize investor returns and also to protect for the risk that the investor is taking, right? One of the other important provision is that you will generally see in a term sheet is anti-dilution, right? Anti-dilution, we'd want to see that, in the initial rounds, right, we would want to ensure that in the event that if there is a down round, say, we raise at 10 crore now, and then later, the company, is not able to do so well, and then you raise at, let's say, a 7 crore round, right? There will be provisions to say that my investment will match the last round of investment, which would be a 7 crore, to ensure that I don't get to be holding the short end of the stick, even though my money came in at an earlier date, right? So this is these are more things to think about from a term sheet standpoint, from the economics part of it. Right? So I'm sure you guys are familiar with the concept of pre and post money. So post money minus the investment, or the other way is pre money plus investment is going to give you post money. High level, generally there are little bit more nuances to that. The valuation that an investor would expect would be on a fully diluted basis, right? So they will say that I want the valuation to be, let's say, $10 million on a fully diluted basis. This means everything is converted to equity, right? All the notes, all the ESOPs, everything is converted, and I would want to put a valuation just to ensure that, at the end of the day, there isn't a surprise there, right? Because the ESOP pool is larger than planned, or, one of many other things that could happen, right? So we spoke about the convertible note, right? A CCPS or a CCD that we call in India, right? So generally, you can say we've deferred the discussion of getting to a valuation, but we want to put a little bit more color to that, right? While I don't know whether the investment is worth 10 crores or 15 crores or 20 crores, I want to ensure that there are certain parameters to that investment, so that it doesn't go too crazy one way or the other, and that is generally defined by the cap and the floor. So take, for example, I put in 100 or 1 crore in a company, and a early stage company, very let's say a new company, and then in the next 1 year they managed to scale up, right, like crazy, right? Let's say they suddenly went to 20 crores in revenue over the next 1.5 or 2 years before my conversion happens, right? So the next round, if they end up raising, let's say, at 100 crore revenue, again, I'm taking extreme cases just to highlight the example. I mean, it's unlikely that generally happens. But so let's say in that period, they have managed to get 100 crore valuation for their Series A, right? My 1 crore will end up being valued at a discount to the 100 crores. Let's say it was a 10% discount or a 20% discount that we had agreed on. My 1 crore would have actually been valued at, let's say, a 20% discount to the 100 crores, which would be an 80 crore number, right? Which for the stage that I invested in and for the perceived risk that I took at an early stage startup, it doesn't capture enough upside for me, right? And so that is why we would end up putting a cap, right? We'd end up saying that, okay, no matter what, even if you come up with a 100 crore valuation even if the company is able to raise money at a 100 crore valuation, my investment, the best case would be that it would convert at the cap, which could be, let's say, a 50 crore number, right? So I would convert at a 50 crore, even though your next round Series A is at a 100 crore, right? And similarly, to protect the founder, there is a floor saying that, if the actual investment, if we are not able to raise money, or if we were not able to raise money at the valuation that we expected, that we will agree upon a base case valuation, let's say, which could be a 4 crore, 5 crore, or depending on the stage of the company. The other, I think, most critical part of the discussion is the discount, right? So one way to think about the discount, right? Usually people will, in India it's a little different, and in the US it's a little different. But the way to kind of think about it is the discount percentage is connected to the cost of capital in your respective markets, right? So if I'm investing $100,000 in a company, okay, I have an option to invest $100,000 in a company. I have the option to keep the $100,000 in my bank account. I have the option to put it in an FD. I have an option to, find other sources of return for that $100,000, right? So the idea is that, okay, if I can keep the $100,000, or, let's say 1 crore, and I'm able to generate 10, 12, 13% fairly risk-free in India today, right? Why would I invest in an early stage startup and take that risk, right? So the idea is that if I'm going to take that risk, I need to be compensated for that risk, right? And that delta is what you will see as, okay, my cost of capital on an average is, let's say, 10 percentage points, right? 10%. And, I would say 10% plus another 800 bips to give me the cost of the discount price that I want to get for the conversion. So while I could have gotten 12%, I'm getting a 20% discount on my investment, which is a much riskier investment, right? So generally that's how at least the investors would think about it from a discount standpoint. And the discounts would increase obviously as you go further and further out. So you would say, okay, 20% within 12 months, maybe 30% within 24 months, and then, whatever, 40%, whatever you want to come up with. And then you capture for the end, the other cases where your company is actually not able to raise money. What happens, right? Okay, we come to a mutually understood number. We go to a third party valuer and say, okay, value the company. All those generally have to be captured and defined. But the one takeaway should be that, the discount should generally, the idea behind the discount is what is the cost of capital commensurate to what is the risk being taken, right? The other things that could be mentioned on a term sheet are obviously milestones, and milestones and tranches are both related, to a certain extent, in that term sheet could say that, while I'm committing to invest $100,000, right, I will put in I would put in $50,000, 50% today, and I will put in 50% pending you hitting a particular, let's say, revenue number, or pending you hitting a particular product goal, first prototype, or pending you hitting let's say, a team hiring of a team member, let's say a COO or a CTO or whatever, right? So there could be milestones put into it. There could be simple tranches which just says, okay, I'll put in my first tranche today. The second tranche will come in after 16 months post review of your performance, right? And so these are again ways for the investors to protect the downside. So so that to ensure that I don't give all the money upfront and then all the money is not burnt by the company, right? So there is convertible debt, preferred equity, which at the end of the day, preferred equity will get converted to regular equity at some point. India doesn't allow for dual voting classes, at least unlike in the US, where one share can control all the voting, and the others in there are 2 tiers or 3 tiers of share classes. But the idea generally is that you can continue to raise investments without valuing the company, right? One of the big issues that especially in the US, one of the big issues that you end up seeing is people keep raising on what is called a safe note, right? Which is essentially a two-pager, three-pager type of note, which just defines high level what the discount is going to be and a floor and a cap, right? And you just keep raising money on that. And I've seen companies which have raised maybe money on 5 or 6 notes, right? Each note is kind of stacked on top of the other note, and until you raise your Series A or until you actually do a priced round, you really don't know how the cap table looks, right? Until you do a priced round, you don't know what percentage of the company that you and the founders will end up owning, because of the way safe notes are structured or because of the way convertibles are structured. So that is another thing to keep in mind, is that while it is very easy to say, okay, I will defer the discussion, I will defer the question of valuation, at the end of the day, you might get to a point where you don't actually know how much of the company you own, and it turns out to be a rude surprise to the founding team and to the entrepreneurs, right? And at which point, to keep the company motivated, the investor will have to come and say, okay, we'll give you some ESOPs or milestone based ESOPs to get you back on track. But those are things that are surprises that should not generally be countenanced. So the other big part of the term sheet, the first part was the economics part. The other is the governance part, right? Governance and control. This is something that people don't pay as much attention to, but is super important, super critical. This will come into play at many times. I mean, it might seem like a small thing to give away at this point, but it will come back each time you're going to raise money, and each time you're going back to the board to take a particular decision, or the investors to take a particular decision, right? So broadly, governance will define what happens with the board. So you will say, okay, investor will get a board seat, investor will get an observer seat, or you could say investor will get 2 board seats and then 1 observer seat, right? So the constitution of the board will be defined in your term sheet, right? The high level, who is going to participate, and who are going to be the constituent members of the board, right? This will have to be defined. CPs and CSS are conditions precedent and conditions subsequent, right? So these are things that are mentioned on the term sheet, which tell you that, okay, we agree to a particular investment, we agree to invest in your company pending these things that get done, right? So conditions precedent is a list that will be handed to the company, saying that, okay, go get all these things done. Maybe go get your cap table cleaned up, go get your taxes filed, your statutory liabilities cleared, go get the ESOP table, ESOP pool created or replenished, right? All those will come within within these conditions. And these are things that the investor wants to ensure that they don't get kind of stuck with something that was there before they came into the company, right? And so these are conditions that are put uh, pre and post investment. So CS will be immediately after investment, something needs to get done and reported back to the investor or to the board. The other critical aspect of your term sheet will be the affirmative rights. These will be again high level. These will be defined in your term sheet, but you'll go into further detail in your agreements. Affirmative rights or reserve matters are things that you will have to bring to the investor or the board representative of the investor uh, to get permission to do, right? So term sheets, or these are things that you will go into, let's say, as something as specific as, okay, if I need to change the direction of the company, okay, you need to let me know. If I need to change how much me as a founder I'm getting paid, you will have to let me know, right? So the idea is that, okay, money has come in, and then, okay, let's start paying everybody above market, or let's start catching up on the salaries that we potentially have missed out from having started this company for 2 years, and we had not taken let's say market salary, or we had taken a small stipend, and then say, okay, now I want to triple my salary and I want to take that with catch up. So those are type of things that uh, decisions that you will have to run it by the investor before you are allowed to take that decision, right? And this could be things like accepting your next round of funding, accepting an offer, even discussing if you want to go and start looking for money for your next round. You might you the you know it can be a affirmative right. It can be your investor can say no, this is not the right time to do it, or the investor can say no, I'll be the person who will invest. And those are things that can be captured. This can be anything, literally. You can capture anything as part of the affirmative rights. But high level, there are generally there are 4, 5, 6 items that are broadly covered within these rights. But these will come into the picture more importantly when things are going south, when things are going bad, or when the company is performing badly, or the investor has a different direction in mind for the company, and the company has let's say a different vision. These are things that will come into the picture. Vesting is a critical part of an investment a term sheet, and your agreement later. What generally is meant by vesting is that, so investor is putting in money into the company. They expect, right? The expectation is that the founders are going to be with the company all the way through with 100% of their focus, right? I don't want to put in 100,000. I don't want to put in some amount of money, and then the founder is starting to do something else, right? Or the founder has interest in 2 or 3 companies, and then I put in one, and then I have only let's say 30% of the founder's time or founder's focus, right? And so what happens generally is, the whatever stake that the founder has or the founding team has, that stake will be essentially taken back and vested over, let's say, a 4-year period. So you will get a 25% of your stock each year that will vest depending on completion of each year. You can have it full ratchet, you can have it partially. I mean, you can have it vest every month, or you can have it vest once, 25% for the year, and then it's a 1 or 0 depending on which side of the time that you end up landing upon. But vesting is very critical from the angle that it ensures that the founders are focused on the company, and the founders essentially respect that an investor has put in money into the company, and the investor expects that the founder's entire attention is directed towards the company and the money. And the other side of it is the employment agreement, right? You can't have an investor working on two things or three things, or I have an investment in the company, and then the founder has a pet project on the side of which the investor doesn't have any upside to. So generally you would be expected, I don't know, not normally at a seed stage unless they are expecting something, but a series A investor will definitely have a very strong employment agreement put in place. The last is EOD is event of default. What happens in the event that something goes wrong, right? And these are detailed conditions, detailed things that will be declared and will be discussed to ensure that in the event that the company goes bust or something goes wrong, what happens, who is held responsible. Most of the term sheets, if you see, especially early stage term sheets, will hold the founders responsible for the money, right? It's, I mean, while everybody realizes that it is equity, it will these things are still pretty tightly written, and will ensure that if things do go wrong, or if there are problems between within the founders, or between the founders, or the company is not going in the direction that was envisaged, uh, the board, or the investor can call an event of default to essentially, or use it as a stick to get the company back in shape, right? And so these are high level, the other side of the term sheet. These are high level things. I mean, we can discuss that in a little bit more detail if you want to ask in the Q&A. What are things that you need to do once you do get a term sheet, right? The first thing obviously is to speak to your lawyer, because most term sheets are written in legalese, and majority of the people see, an investor is going to see, you know uh, 15, 20, 30 term sheets, right? So this is something that they have to keep doing. So they are familiar with the process, they are familiar with what the term sheet is, they're familiar with the arcane provisions that you might see on a term sheet, which a founder might not know about or not be familiar with, but it will be slid into the agreement, right? So obviously speak to your lawyer and get their feedback and get their concurrence on moving forward. One of the important things which I've seen in multiple term sheet discussions is that once the term sheet is sent, there is radio silence for a long time, right? Either the company is kind of using the term sheet to is unhappy with the whatever condition, whether it is economic or whether it is governance. The company is unhappy with it and then is kind of shopping around. But it's a very small network, it's a very small ecosystem, and that goes both ways, right? Both goes applies just as much for an investor as it does for a founder, in that the ecosystem is very small. People know everybody, people are familiar with everybody in the ecosystem. You see different people, you meet them at different events, different incubation events, different startup events. So the idea is that never keep anybody guessing as to what is happening. Don't keep dragging things along. If you're not happy, and say you're not happy, and move along. See if you can negotiate new better terms, rather than keeping silent and trying to do trying by rather than keeping silent, right? The immediate next step after a term sheet is that the investor will want to do due diligence, right? And this depending again on the stage of the investment, could be 1 week, could be 2-3 months, right? I've seen Series A due diligence that has kind of dragged on for 3 months, and a lot of money that has also been spent. Usually the cost of the due diligence will come out of the investment that the investor is putting in. So if they're investing, let's say 1 crore, and the due diligence costs, let's say 2 lakhs, it will essentially get subtracted from that. It's not something that's going to be paid by the investor separately. But the idea to accelerate the process is to keep everything ready from a due diligence standpoint. Once when you kind of get to that point where you're in the market for a term sheet and you're close to getting one. So most startups have some, a data room which has, the cap table, which has your agreements, which has IP related stuff that you guys might have, your projections, your historical audited financials, right? Your GST, whatever else that is stat that is required. All those things, if you put it into one place, and then when you're ready to go, when the term sheet is given to you, just share a link to the investor and say, hey, this is the all the stuff is ready. And these are things that will help accelerate you to get to the money once the term sheet is given. The other parts, again, these are things that I'm highlighting from having seen people. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, there, sir.
Yeah. The other parts of it are from people kind of focusing on the wrong things. One of the things I've seen is people, hang on to very small, very kind of unnecessary things, and essentially end up tanking a whole term sheet, which would have been good for the company, right? So understand what is critical, what is important, right? There are some things that you can give up on for the larger vision of the company and for the larger direction of the company. Every single term in a term sheet doesn't mean that every single term has to be negotiated and every single term has to be bargained upon, right? Some of these are there just as a matter of process, right? Understand the difference between economics and control. I think we went through some of it a little earlier. Term sheets are generally non-binding, they're not binding, so you can kind of take it take a term sheet and start talking to other people, but just understand the nuances there and understand the sensibilities of the different people involved there, right? And I think finally, understand that having a signed term sheet does not mean the round is closed, right? There is a long way to go. That's just the first step. I mean, it's a big step, but it's nowhere close to being done. There are so many things that can torpedo the whole process well after you have a signed term sheet, right? There's a whole process of lawyers and accountants and auditors that will get involved. So until the money really hits your account, many things can change, right? So lastly, I just have a small question, and I don't know how we can interact. I don't know, is there a chat box,
Yes, sir.
Archana?
Is there a chat box?
So yeah, so there's a founder of a company who's negotiated very hard to ensure that he keeps 51% of the company, right? He wants to ensure that he has 51% of the company, right? He spent a lot of time negotiating it, right? Thinking that 51 is an important number to maintain, right? And he fights that battle and he ensures that. So I want to understand from you guys: is this economics or is this control? Yeah, and you can unmute and talk, or I don't know if there is how to.
I think it's control.
We are getting answers in the chat box.
How do I see the chat box?
So there will be a right side, sir. People and chat. So if you click chat means you can view the answers, sir. Just go to your screen, sir.
No, I think with the
Google.
yeah, now I can see it, but I had to turn off the.
Stop share screening, sir. So
Okay,
you can.
great. So yeah, I think everybody seems to have, at least everyone seems to have understood that it is clearly a control uh, uh, event that everybody seems to think. Anybody else? Is anyone saying it is an economics thing? Anybody? Please unmute also when.
No one, sir.
Nobody? Okay. So interestingly, right, the answer is it is purely economics. Okay. It is not control. Okay. See, we are not, I mean, it is, the founder has 51% of the company. He has rights to 51% of the economic proceeds of selling that company. That's all, right? By having 51% of the company, he is not going to get any additional rights in that company, because all of them are defined in the affirmative matters. All of them are defined in the in the term sheet, in the investors governance and control part of the term sheet, right? So having 51% doesn't mean that you get to control the decisions of that company, right? I will have a board person, I will have a board member on your board. You will have 3 board members. I will be the only board member, and I can still control the direction at which this is going. So by holding 51%, it doesn't really mean that you have control over the company, right? So at the stage that we are investing in, this is purely an economic thing. By owning 51% or whatever else that number is, 55%, 60%, you end up owning only the economic rights of that. You do not end up owning the governance or control side of it, right? And so this is a common mistake that most people don't think about, because you're signing off or you're signing away your control. When you sign a term sheet, you're signing away most of your control to the investor coming on board, and that control keeps getting passed on depending on whether the Series A or Series B or Series C investor comes on board. That control keeps getting changed, right? So this is, this again goes to highlight, the nuances between the governance and economic side of the investment. Lastly, I just wanted to show. Can you can't see my screen, right? One second.
Yes, sir.
So lastly, just sign off. These are some good books to read, from an early stage, founder's standpoint, right? This gives you a really good idea of what, investments, what VC investments are all about, right? What are the governing principles from, what are the motivations from an investor standpoint? What are they looking for? What drives an investor, right? From a fund standpoint, right, most of the time what drives an investor is their LPs, right? Their limited partners, who are essentially the investors in the fund, right? And the fact that at some point they have to go back and give money back to the investor at a multiple, right? At an X, right? The LP is expecting that the guy running the fund, right, whichever fund it is, fund A, B, C, X, Y, Z, is going to come back to me and say, okay, here is 5x or 6x or whatever X that number is, and that's why I'm giving you. That's why I and LP am investing in your fund, right? And so both these books are very interesting and kind of give you a very good color on the motivations and the current way kind of investments happen currently. Both are available on Amazon. So I think with that, thanks, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. So we got few questions in the chat box. So Jnana Krishnan, you can unmute yourself and go ahead with your question. Jnana Krishnan? Okay, sir, I can read out his question. So he's asking what is the standard format for the term sheet and key components for the term sheet?
Yeah. So standard format, I think you have a ton of I think downloadable term sheets. There is really none, in the sense that a term sheet is what an investor considers important and what like I said, I've seen a 2-page term sheet. I've seen a 20-page term sheet, right? And I've seen a 2-page term sheet being very effective and a 20-page term sheet being completely rubbish, right? So it's a matter of how well things are captured in those 2 pages, and it's a you could write a 20-page story and not capture the same things. But at the end of the day, it is about, like I said, about aligning the goals of the investors and the founders. So there isn't really a template, so to say. There are, if you Google, you're going to find thousands of templates, and high level, you will have those, the points that I pointed out, you will have those captured in one way or the other. Those are the components that will end up making up the term sheet. Let's say, for example, certain investors don't think that EOD is really enforceable, right? So I've seen many investors say, I don't think it's enforceable, so there's no point in putting it on the term sheet, right? And so they end up not putting it, right? Whereas other investors say, as a matter of policy, in the event that this does come up to legal scrutiny, or this does go into the legal domain, I want to ensure that everything is protected from that standpoint. And so there isn't a standard from that standpoint, right? Broadly, you will have governance concepts, you will have economic concepts, and those are the things that you want to kind of go into and negotiate. But I wouldn't say there is one single template that or one standard format for a term sheet as you are asking for. The key components we had obviously covered in the last 30-40 minutes. What investors why
Why a successful term sheet is a crucial with the investor?
I don't know. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, in the sense that it's you negotiated to ensure that your side of things are taken care of, right? Your economic interests and your personal position is taken care of. Ideally, an investor, if a founder is not negotiating, I'll put a 4x liquidation preference into the term sheet, right? And that will be crippling for you to raise your next round in the event that, because my liquidation preference will supersede anything else, right? And so it is I mean, negotiating is obviously very important to ensure that your interests are taken care of. What investors need to know from startups business?
In term sheets.
Not sure what that question means. If he's there, if he wants to ask.
Then we can move to the next question. So Sonam Pankaj. So Sonam Pankaj, can you unmute and go ahead with your question?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, sir. Thank you for the talk.
Sure.
I wanted to ask that what are the standard key points that a founder should keep in his mind to keep his interest, in the term sheet, like his economic interest, or there are various ways, but what are the key points that we should keep in mind?
Right. So again, I think high level. I mean, I think we had discussed a lot of the terms, but if you want to quickly recap, obviously you want to put in a if it's a priced round, you want to put in a valuation number. If it is not, you want to define the discounts, or you want to define the parameters of the conversion. You would ensure that you define. One of the key things to ensure that is captured is to capture the edge cases always, right? What happens is, everybody wants things to go well, right? But it's not always the case. You will, there will be situations when things don't go well, or things are problematic, or there are issues at hand, right? I mean, doing a startup is, things are not always bright and rosy. There are going to be problems that you guys will have to overcome, and so you should ensure that the edge cases are always captured. What happens, especially in a convertible note, ensure that the edge cases are captured, to ensure that your rights are protected or your upside is protected to that extent. I think otherwise, largely the points, you want to try to ensure that you have some control over governance. One of the important things, and I think that I didn't speak about, I think one of the important things is, while money is money, right? I mean, whether it comes from investor A or whether it comes from investor B, I think one interesting thing and important thing that all of you guys should think about is value where the money is coming from, right? The money coming from investor A, who has a strong understanding of, let's say, you guys are all HTIC, so let's say you have an investor who has strong investments in the healthcare space or strong investments in the med tech space. They obviously have more context to it, or there might be an investor who has managed to get a big exit from a med tech startup, right? It's in all likeliness, they have a very strong understanding of the market. They have right connects into the different people, right connects into the different networks, right connects into the different funds, right, that you might need to know for your next rounds, right, your next raises. So I think you should always do while the investor is doing a due diligence on the entrepreneur or the founder, ensure that you guys are also at the same time doing your due diligence on who the investors are, so that it's more likely that you guys will see eye to eye, right? If you get a consumer space, FMCG type of company, brand type of investor, right, to come and invest in med tech, while aspirationally they might be interested, right? The fund might say, okay, now we think we should do med tech, or we should do healthcare tech, or whatever, right? They might not really be the right people to help you, to guide you, to do the next raise, or to help you with your GTM, to help you with hiring, right? All these things. See, an investor comes in and they're not going to be passive, especially not a early stage investor, right? Investor is going to be very active. Like, wherever I'm on the board, I'm going to be extremely active. I'm going to watch what's happening. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to help with the hiring. I'm going to be on fundraise calls. I'm going to be on GTM calls, right? So you want to be active, and for that, the investor is going to be active only if they understand and know your space, right? They are going to want to participate at that point better, only if they have that alignment. And so I think that's something that you guys should keep in mind and keep a watch out for as you go looking for your seed stage or for your early stage investment.
Hope that so many question has been answered.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So we have another question from Archana, sir. So she is asking, how long does it take to get a term sheet for a startup?
Again, I think, Archana, there is really no right answer. Before you get a term sheet, there are going to be multiple levels of discussions. Any investor especially a seed stage investor, they're going to want to spend time with the founders to understand the vision and to understand the direction that they want to take the company, given the money coming in. What are they going to do with that money, right? And at the seed stage, there is really not going to be much else to evaluate other than what the market potential is and what the founder's vision to capture that market is, right? And so it is, timeline wise, I think the fastest I would have seen a term sheet being handed out from start of discussion would probably be a month, right? But I've seen it drag on for much longer. But again, I'm saying this from start of discussions, right? From start of early discussions.
Thank you, sir. So we have question from again Jnana Krishnan. Jnana Krishnan, can you mute yourself and go ahead with your question?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, Jnanakrishnan.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yes, Jnanakrishnan. So go ahead with your question.
Okay. My question is, what are the clause that must be put on liquidation so that the founders or the startups are benefited?
Okay. So ideally, if you should be benefited on liquidation, you shouldn't put a liquidation preference at all. But it's very unlikely that any investor will agree to it. If you don't put a lick pref at all, that would be the best case for a startup, because essentially what happens then is that the investor becomes one with all the other people on the cap table, all the other entities on the cap table. The investor is the same. I mean, the economic rights are the same for the investor, right? Whereas if you say a 1x liquidation preference, which is the most likely that you will get, I mean, or a 1.5, a 1x means that the investor says, okay, I will take my money, and I'm saying generally, and you should ensure that it's a non-participating, because if it's a participating, what is called a double dip, where you get your money and then you get to participate on the the pro rata balance as well, right? So 1x non-participating is the most common that I have seen, which is fair to both the investor and fair to to the founder as well.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the clarity.
Thank you,
Definitely.
Nanakrishnan. So as we said, we reached at 5:30, sir, and thank you
Sure.
for answering the questions, sir. So before we wrap the session, I would like to make few announcements. So we posted the feedback form link in the chat box. I request the participants to please fill the feedback form for us to improve the upcoming Knowledge Tuesday sessions. And we are hosting an Ask Me Anything series session on coming Thursday at 5 p.m. on the topic Ask Me Anything on Hospital Needs. The speaker is Dr. Saravanan, who is a GM and unit head at Dr. Mehta's Hospital. And once again, sir, thank you for your time. And it was a really insightful session, I would like to say. So, we used to upload our session in our YouTube channel, sir. So, for the participants who missed the session, that is fine with you, sir.
Sure, please go ahead.
So, thank you, sir, and have a good evening. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, guys. Hope it was helpful. Bye bye.
Bye, sir.